Hey everybody, how we doing this morning? Doing good? All right. Hey, my name's Matt, one of the pastors here on staff. And as we jump into our perfect love study, I want to start off with just this question. Have you ever been in a position where you had a couple choices and you know that one of the choices is maybe the right way to go, but in the moment you'd much rather go the wrong way? Like, have you ever made a decision you just know you're going to regret a moment later? You ever been in that situation? Yeah, and I'm not trying to get you to divulge your deepest, darkest secrets. I mean, don't come up after me. Don't come up to me afterward and be like, and that's when I realized I basically started a dogfighting ring in my backyard. Like, I'm not trying to pull that out of you. I just mean regular pedestrian, a couple choices. This one might be smarter, but this one is going to feel a little bit better in the moment. And you just go that direction instead. Have you guys ever been there? Yeah? All right, well, let me tell you a story about one of those crossroads that I came up to a couple years back where I just knowingly made a decision that I'm probably going to regret this a little bit later, but right now it feels pretty good. So a little bit of preface before we get into it. I'm terrible at I'm really good at getting gifts. I'm terrible at giving gifts. I don't know what it is about it. It's the thoughtfulness, it's the care, the love. I just not necessarily my forte. In fact, my wife will make fun of me. She'll be like, Matt, what are we going to get your dad for Father's Day? I'm like, what do you mean? What are we going to get him? We're getting him cash. Isn't that everybody's favorite gift? It's literally a gift card to everywhere. Like, why would we not just get him cash? And she's like, no, you gotta get something for him. And I'm like, all right, whatever. So I'm terrible at giving gifts. But a few years back, I had this epiphany. And I'm telling you, I'm probably the first person to ever figure this out. So, if you're a note taker, you need to write this down. You don't have to wait until the week of Mother's Day to get your mom something. I know, it's mind-blowing. But I figured out in early April, I can get something for my mom right now, and it'll be just as good when I give it to her in May as if I bought it, the Friday before. This is brilliant. So I find one of those websites that specializes in delivering flowers. You know what I'm talking about? Literally, it's the only thing they do is deliver flowers. So I in early part of April, I make the arrangements to have this beautiful bouquet of flowers delivered to my mom, not on Mother's Day, but the Thursday before Mother's Day at her work, so that all of her coworkers will know she's got the best son in the world, right? That's what I'm saying. So I work out all the details, and I've got it set, and I'm not going to even preface her. I'm not going to even preface that it's coming. I'm just going to let it arrive, and then let the praise come rolling in. That's my game plan. Well, that Thursday before Mother's Day hits, and my mom doesn't call me. I'm like, what a jerk, right? She's not even thanking me for these. No, I'm just kidding. I know my mom well enough to know that if she gets flowers from me, she's calling me right then and there. So I wait and still no phone call. So eventually I get a little impatient. I call my sister, and I'm like, Kristen, did mom come home with the flowers? Did she get home with those? She goes, what flowers are you talking about? The flowers I sent her. She's like, Mom didn't get any flowers. I'm like, all right, I'll take care of this. So I call up this flower company, and I'm like, what's the deal? These are supposed to be delivered the Thursday before, and they never arrived. I'm like, Mr. Adrian, we're really sorry. Something happened, but don't worry, we'll get your mom some flowers. I'm like, okay, you can do that, but we'll just get them there on Sunday. If you can get them there to her on Sunday, that's all I need. They go, okay, no problem. We'll take care of this. That was a mistake. So Mother's Day comes, and I call my mom, and I'm expecting to hear her say, Matt, thanks so much for the flowers. But that never comes up. And as I start to press into it, hey, any interesting packages come today? She's like, no. I'm like, what in the world? And so I get off the phone realizing that this flower company, literally, it's the only thing that they do. They have one job. That's to deliver flowers. And on the most important day of the motherhood year, they don't bring her anything. And so I am ticked. So I fake my way through the rest of the phone call. I hang up, and then I realize I've got to hold this company accountable. So I start to play through in my mind. You guys ever do that? You start practicing the conversation before you actually have it. And so I'm like, I'm going to lay into them. I'm going to let them have it. And I suddenly was at this moment. I was at this crossroads. I can either go maybe the right choice, where it's I hold them accountable, but have some grace, or I can go the way that's going to feel a lot better in the moment. I'm going to let them have it. And I'm like, all right, I'm going this way. So And the thing is, as I start to practice the conversation, hurts and pains that I didn't even know were still inside me start like bubbling up, right? It's like, not only am I upset about Mother's Day, I'm upset about Kyle England, who made fun of me in the 8th grade. And I'm also upset about Brittany S., who said she didn't want to be my girlfriend in the 5th grade. Like, all these things are like bubbling up. And so when I call, I'm like, this is the perfect storm. These people, they don't know I'm a pastor. They don't even know I'm a Christian. This is completely anonymous, and I can just say whatever I want in this moment. And so I call them up, and they're like, how can we help you? I'm like, you ruined Mother's Day. And then they handled it the absolute worst way possible. I'm telling you, the absolute worst way possible. Because they say back to me, oh, we are so sorry. How can we make this up to you? And I'm like, what? That's not how this works. You're supposed to be like, hey, Matt, we're supposed to fight me on this so I can like lay into you and fight you on this. But in the moment, they took ownership of it, and it completely ruined my day. Have you guys ever been there in that situation? Have you guys ever been there? Well, so that was like a moment where I had two choices. I could either go the direction that, I probably should go, or the direction that I'm probably going to regret this a little bit later. And I went that direction, and on that day, and on that day in particular, my opportunity was cut short. But there's been a lot of other times in my life where I've had those two directions, and I went the direction that I know I'm going to regret just a little bit later, and nothing jumped out to stop me. Have you guys ever been there? Have you guys ever been in that situation where you had the two opportunities, and you knew which way was the right way, which way was the wrong way, but you chose to go the wrong way anyway? Sometimes life can be just that simple. Sometimes life can be just that easy, where you know the right way, you know the wrong way, and you can choose the right or the wrong, and you just live with the circumstances. But not every moment is like that. Not every moment is like that. I'm going to tell you a story. It was August 23rd, 1973, and Jan-Erik Olsson walks into the Creditbanken in Stockholm, Sweden, with intent to rob it. He was a known criminal on leave from prison, and he walks into this bank ready to rob it. Within minutes, a full-fledged hostage situation is unfolding. The police storm in, and the police are also taken hostage, and now we've got a standoff. Now, the police commissioner isn't the one to make the first phone call. It's not the lieutenant. The Prime Minister of Sweden calls in to negotiate with Jan-Erik and his partner about the release of these hostages. As he calls in, Jan-Erik has some demands. He says, we're going to kill everybody in this room unless these demands are met. We're demanding 3 million kroner, 2 guns, a bulletproof vest, helmets, and naturally, a fast car. If you ever are holding somebody hostage, ask for the fast car. That's what you need. If you're a note taker, you can write that down. And so these are the demands. And as they're hanging up the phone with the Prime Minister of Sweden, they can hear screams on the other end of the line. Now, the standoff didn't last an afternoon, didn't last one day. It actually lasted 6 days. And so the next communication that came out of the Creditbanken in Stockholm, Sweden, was not from Jan-Erik nor his partner. It was from one of the hostages. And as the hostage is talking to the authorities, she starts to demand that they be released. And not just the hostages. She doesn't just say, I want the police to release us. She says, I want the hostages and our captors to all be let go and free to walk out of this place completely innocent. The standoff finally ends. Jan-Erik is arrested. His partner's also arrested. They go to trial. And these hostages who were held at gunpoint, their lives were threatened for 6 full days. Rather than going to the trial to testify against them, actually go to trial and testify on behalf of Jan-Erik and his partner. It's the strangest thing. In fact, here we are 42 years later, and many of these hostages still have friendships and relationships with Jan-Erik and his partner to this very day. Now, this situation, what happened in Stockholm, Sweden in 1973, it caused psychologists and criminologists to pause and consider what was going on. And after 6 days of being held captive, many of these people were very sympathetic. They were very empathetic to their captors. And they wanted to know why. And they actually coined this phrase, Stockholm Syndrome, to describe what happens when people who are held captive begin to feel empathy and positive feelings towards their captors. And here's the deal. Many of us are suffering Stockholm, Sweden, as well, and we just don't even know it. The Bible describes the trajectory of our decisions like roads. In fact, Jesus at one point is like, broad is the path that leads to destruction, and narrow is the gate that leads to life, right? I mean, that's what Jesus said. It's like maybe a better way to put it for us in the 21st century. It's like you have two different roads, and the trajectory of your decisions is going to take you one of two places, either towards destruction or to God. And so as we hear this, we think, okay, this is simple. This is pretty easy, right? Like you've got one highway that is paved with the blood of the innocent, right? It's populated by people who are always trying to cut you off. On the highway, you're going to see billboards. One's for Hitler, one's for the devil, one's for cable, television, customer service departments, of course, right? And of course, the Oakland Raiders have a big presence on the road. I'm just kidding. And so all you need to do if you want to get off the highway that's heading towards destruction is say, Jesus, take the wheel, and he'll grab it, flip the U-turn, and put you on the good path, right? And that highway, it's awesome. It's a lot like the 91 Expressway. There's hardly any traffic. They have one of those bridges that the wildlife can cross over so they don't become roadkill, right? Like that's what we assume it's like. And so if I'm on the road to destruction, if I'm making the bad choices, all I need to do is say, Jesus, take the wheel, and he's going to put me on the right path. But the reality is, many of us are suffering Stockholm Syndrome with our decisions. And even though the trajectory is taking us the way of destruction, it doesn't look that bad. It doesn't look like it's a bad direction to go. And even though there's a lot of symptoms in our life that just continue to testify to the fact that this is not necessarily direction in the way that we'd want to go, we love this direction. We feel connected to this direction. And we won't get off this highway no matter what the symptoms are, because it just feels so natural. It just feels so right. It's just not as easy as saying, hey, I'm going to start going the other way. And this comes out in our speech. It comes out in the words that we say. We say things like, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who does this. We say things like, well, I know that ethically it's kind of a gray area, but this is just how business is done. This is standard practices and procedure. We start thinking things like, she's really cold to me right now. I think I deserve to be happy. Let me see if that girl will talk to me. We start saying things like, this is victimless. I don't know who's even gonna say anything if I go this direction, if I make this choice. We start saying things like, she's never gonna know. I know she told this to me in confidence, but this is too good to keep to myself. We start saying these things, and it comes out in our speech that we're on the wrong path, but we don't even recognize that it's the wrong way. We don't even recognize that that's it. So what's my motivation? Why is it that some of us can be suffering from Stockholm Syndrome and on the path to destruction, on the 666 Expressway, and have no idea that what we're doing is the wrong direction, what we're doing is the wrong way? How can that be? What is our motivation for continuing to go in that direction? Let's say a lot of it comes down to this word right here. Fulfillment. Fulfillment. Many of us recognize that something is just not right in my life. And so we keep grasping for fulfillment. Now, we've all tasted it. We've all seen glimpses of fulfillment. It's that feeling you get, it's that warm feeling you get when you finish a really good book, or you walk out of a theater after a great movie, and it's just like, man, that was really good. It's that sense of peace. It's that feeling of, man, this was great. At the end of Thanksgiving or in the middle of Christmas, when you're not worried about work and the entire family is gathered around the table, and it just seems like all your problems are so far away and everybody's getting along, and it's great. We've all seen glimpses of fulfillment. We've all tasted a little bit of fulfillment, and it's addictive, and we want a little bit more of it. And the thing is, as we're on that road to destruction, we're going to get tastes of it. We're going to get glimpses of it. There's going to be little moments of, oh, that was so great. Oh, I just feel so much better. But the one thing that keeps happening over and over and over is as we get those little tastes, as we get those little glimpses of what fulfillment actually feels like, it typically leaves us in a worse spot. And it's a lot like if you're out in the ocean and you just keep getting sucked under the waves, and as you keep fighting to get above and keep getting a little bit more breath, it's like you get that breath, but then you get sucked back down, and you try even harder to get back up to the top, and then you get sucked back down, and you get that breath, and it feels so great, but then you get sucked back under, and so you fight your hardest until you get a little bit more, and then you get sucked back under. And many of us are in this rat race. We're like the person who's stuck in the ocean, where we're trying our hardest to get fulfillment. We're trying our hardest to make sure that everything feels whole again, everything feels right again. And as soon as we get that breath, we're sucked back under, just to fight a little bit harder once again. That's where many of us are at. That's where many of us are at. And the worst part about it is to get off that road, to get off that direction that's heading towards destruction, the way that will never leave us fulfilled ultimately. It's not as simple as saying, okay, I'm going to be better, or I'm going to do better, or I'm just going to stop doing these things, and then we'll have this taken care of. I'll be in the right place again. It's not that simple. In fact, John, as we go into perfect love, as we study the book of 1 John chapter 2, he's actually going to give us a description of maybe what our root issue is. Maybe what it's going to take to get out of this. Maybe what it means for every single one of us as we're in this position. And it comes down to this concept right here, is that we actually need to hate love. Now, I know that sounds crazy because I have a big perfect love sign behind me, and it's like, isn't church all about love? Isn't that what you guys do here? Yeah, we do. We do love. That is our thing. But there's a certain type of love that we need to hate. And so what is that certain type of love? Well, in 1 John chapter 2, verse 15, if you have your Bible, if you want to read it on the screen, if you want to look at it in the notes, however you look at it, that's fine. But this is what 1 John 2:15 says. It says, do not love. But do not love what? What are we not supposed to love? It says, do not love this world, nor the things it offers you, for when you love the world, you do not have the love of the Father in you. Now, real quick, we need to take a time out and actually examine what this means, but also what it doesn't mean. And so I want to start with what this verse doesn't mean. Because many of us, we open up our Bibles and we see something that says, do not love this world, nor the things it offers you, and we start to play out in our minds, what are the consequences of this statement right here? And some people have read verses like this, and they've taken it to the extreme. They said, all right, don't love the world. Got it. I'm going to shoot all worldly living. So we're going to sell the car. We're selling the TV. No more smartphones. We're moving to the country with the horse and a buggy. I'm going to grow a beard, name my kids Ezekiel and Jedediah, and boom, I'm finally living this out. I'm not loving the world, nor the things it offers me, right? You don't have to become Amish to really live this out. And I would apologize to all the Amish who are listening to the podcast or watching the video, but I don't think that we have to worry about that today. So the Bible is not saying that you have to move to the country and just be a complete hermit to not love the world. Now, it's also not saying that you have to hate people who live in the world. We don't want to try and foster an us versus them mentality within the church. That's not what God wants for us, and that's not ultimately what will lead us to any kind of victory in any realm of society. And we've all seen it on Facebook. It's when we take maybe something that is a moral principle from the Bible, but we strip it of all grace, and we start to attack people who aren't necessarily followers of Jesus with it. We've all seen that, right? We've all maybe even participated in that at some points. I know I have. And the reality is that's not what this is saying either. It's not saying that we attack the people who live in the world. In fact, Jesus actually said, hey, I didn't come to shame the lost. I came to seek and save them, right? I came to seek and save the lost. Also, John 3:16, it's one of the most famous verses in all of the Bible. You see the guy with the sign at the football game with it on all the time. It says, for God so loved the world, right? So what this verse is not saying, this is not saying that we completely separate ourselves from society and live out in the middle of the woods in a militia camp. It's not saying that. It's also not saying that we should hate people who live in the world. So as I read this, what does it mean to not love the world? How do I interpret this? Well, I believe that what John is about to say, and something that I think that you should know as well, is that what John is saying is that there is a system of thinking, there is a way of living that all of us are naturally drawn to. It's our default. It's where we always would go at a moment's notice. And It's a system of behavior and thinking that ultimately we should reject because it's never going to lead us to fulfillment. It will never lead us to where ultimately God wants us to go. And so if you're somebody who's sitting here today and you ask yourself the question, okay, there's a lot of information that's just been thrown at me. You say that Stockholm Syndrome, is such that you might be going the wrong direction and you don't know it. In fact, you might love it. How would I know if I actually love the world? I'm a follower of Jesus. I want to go the right direction. How do I know if I'm following the wrong way or the right way? Now, luckily, John actually defines this for us. And he says in verse 16, if you want to know if you love the world more than you love God, if you want to know if you're going the direction that the world is going to send you that ultimately will lead to destruction, and you want to go the way that God wants you to go, if you want to know if that's you, then here are some markers for you. Verse 16 says, for the world offers only and this is a very important word, a craving for physical pleasure. Everybody say the word craving. Craving. Okay, good. So the world offers only a craving for physical pleasure. Now, if this is true, if this were true, that we live in a world that just seems to crave physical pleasure, then there's some symptoms that we probably see in society. There's probably some things that we would see. Now, one of the things that pops in my head immediately, if this were true, we'd probably live in a world that's addicted to sex, right? I mean, that's probably what would happen. Did you know, I did some research, this is crazy. Did you know that the pornography industry in the United States generates over $10 billion annually? Now, the thing is, there's a ton of free pornography that you can get on the internet, but just the stuff that they can monetize, just the stuff that they can charge people for, it generates $10 billion a year. That's more than the NFL, Major League Baseball, and the NBA generates, wait for it, combined. America's pastime is pornography. Like, that is the world we live in. And if we lived in a world that only craved physical pleasure, that's something we'd probably see. If we lived in a world that just seemed to crave physical pleasure, we'd probably see a world that's addicted to food, right? One that just seems to medicate, try and forget the day with maybe some ice cream, maybe try and stuff our faces whenever we're having a down day. If we lived in a world that just seemed to crave physical pleasure, we'd probably have a problem with how much we consume. We'd probably eat way more than we need. If we lived in a world that was addicted, that craved physical pleasure, drug and alcohol abuse would probably be a big issue in our society, right? Do you know that 23.5 million Americans are a drug addict or an alcoholic? 23.5 million. All right, what else is a sign of maybe loving the world on that path to destruction more than maybe on the path to God? It's all right, say the word again, craving for everything that we see. Now, if this were true in society, if this were actually true in our society, we'd probably be in debt up to our eyeballs, right? Yeah, I mean, that's something we'd probably see if we really did have a craving for everything we saw. If we wanted more and more and more, that's probably what we'd see. Check this out. 75% of Americans have a credit card. That's no big deal. I've got like 3 or 4 in my pocket right now. I'm not trying to demonize credit cards. But this is what I found incredible. The average American has $15,000 in credit card debt. That's not a car payment. That's not your mortgage. That's not student loans. That's credit card debt. The wealthiest nation on the planet, and no matter what, it's just still not enough. It's still not enough. If this were true, if we had a craving for everything that we see, it probably wouldn't be good enough to upgrade our phones every 2 years. We'd probably have to start upgrading it every year, right? Like whenever the new one came out, we'd have to get that next plan so that we can have it. If this were true, we probably wouldn't be able to keep a car for more than a couple years. We'd probably need to upgrade to the new one because, the old one, it doesn't have the cool stuff. I need the cool stuff, right? That's what I need. If this were true, we'd probably be putting a lot of money on our credit cards as we go to the mall and buy the latest fashions and fill a closet full of clothes that we're going to maybe wear once or twice. That's probably what we would see, right? If we really had a craving for everything that we saw. Okay, what else? What else is out there that's a marker that we really love the world more than we love God? Verse 16, and a pride in our achievements and possessions. Okay, this time we're not saying craving. I want you to say the word pride, all right? 1, 2, 3. Pride. So it's a pride in our achievements and possessions. Now, if this were true, if this were true in our society, we'd probably see a lot of white-collar crime. We'd probably see a lot of corporate backstabbing. We see a winner versus loser mentality within the cultures of our businesses and our lives. We'd probably expect to see a lot of obnoxious bragging on social media about the vacations that we're taking, about the raise that we just got, the promotion, the awards. We'd probably see a lot of like chest puffing out and as we have conversations with people. And I know that's not your problem, but that's probably what we would see inside our society if this were true. We'd probably see a pride in our achievements and possessions. Now, some of you are probably sitting here thinking right now, what did I just walk into? This is totally strange. This guy's been ranting about my Instagram account for the last 10 minutes, and I want out of this. No. I want you to think about this. Is God down on physical pleasure? Is God down on blessing you with good things? Is God down on elevating you to positions of honor and achievement? Absolutely not. God is not down on these things in and of themselves. Because in the right context, physical pleasure, accumulating even certain things, being blessed, being elevated to places of honor, those are good things. Those are good things. In fact, throughout the Bible, we see it happen. God actually gave us sex. Like, this isn't something that Adam and Eve were in the garden, they're like, oh my gosh, did you know it did that? Like, that's not what happened. This is actually a gift from God to us. Like, God gave us sex. Like, that's his thing. There's a guy in the Bible named Solomon, and Solomon was a king, and God gave him so much that he was described as the wealthiest man on earth. We see throughout the Bible that God was able to elevate people to positions of high honor. He made people kings. He made people rulers of nations. God did a lot of these things. A lot of these things in and of themselves are not evil. They're not evil. But in the right context, they can be. When the cravings take over, when the pride takes over, we're all worshiping something. I hope you guys relate. Even if you're a self-proclaimed agnostic or an atheist, you still ultimately worship something. You still sacrifice and you still grasp for something in your life. You're constantly worshiping, whether you see it that way or not. You're pouring yourself into, you're sacrificing, you're ultimately worshiping something. The question is, what are you worshiping? If you're a follower of Jesus, you would say, I'm going to put God on the pedestal of my life. But many of us, we go on that road that the rest of the world is going, and we try and find fulfillment, we try to find protection, we try to find provision, we try and find all the security in all these things, the cravings for physical pleasures. We try and find fulfillment in accumulating more and more stuff. We try and find fulfillment in our achievements and our possessions. And what happens when we take good things and we make them God things, they ultimately become bad things. When we make good things into God things, they become bad things. I don't believe that God is a cosmic killjoy who doesn't want you to be happy. He doesn't want you to have any physical pleasure. He doesn't want you to have anything that you see. He doesn't want you to have any kind of achievements or possessions. That's not God's point at all. God is not down on these things. And so how does this narrative of God actually wants good things for you, how does that work within the context of 1 John chapter 2, where he's like, do not love the world, nor the things it offers you. Try and reject the craving for physical pleasure. Try and reject a craving for everything you see. Try and reject pride in your achievements and possessions. How does that work in this context? Well, he actually defines it for us. In verse 16, it says these, meaning these three things, the cravings for physical pleasures, the cravings for everything we see, the pride in our achievements and possessions, they're not from the Father, but are from this world. Those cravings, the pride, it's not from the Father, it's of this world. And this world, and this is really important, so lean in and listen to this, and this world is fading away along with everything that people crave. But anyone who does what pleases God will live forever. So what is trying to be communicated in these verses is God is not down on these things because these things are intrinsically evil. God is down on you pouring yourself out. God is down on you pouring your family out. God is down on you sacrificing all of your income into things that ultimately are never going to last. That are never going to last. These things were never meant to satisfy us. The physical pleasure, the material blessings, our achievements and our possessions, those were never meant to last. We've made good things God things, and they're becoming bad things for us. And as a society, As a society, I don't even have to ask permission for this to be true. We all know this is true. It's written all over our society. As a society, we've said that the world's way to fulfillment, the world's way to happiness, is if I can just have easy access to sex, I'll be happy. Like if I can just have that, like I'll be happy. If I can just make $1 more than what I currently have, or $1 more than what's currently projected, that's when I'll feel fulfilled. That's when I'll be happy. If I can just get that promotion, I'll be happy. Those things are not in and of themselves evil, but when they're elevated to that place of such high esteem, that's when we have a society that says it doesn't matter what the cost is. It doesn't matter how far this craving is going to take me. It doesn't matter how much this pride seems to fuel my fulfillment. It doesn't matter. I deserve this. It doesn't matter if I miss every major milestone in my kid's life. This salary is going to come at a cost. It doesn't matter if there are people who will never look me in the eye again, because I want to make sure that I'm doing what's best for the bottom line. I need to prove my worth. And as a result, think about this. As a result, we live in a society that's never had more sex, that's never made more money, that's never had or created more avenues for prestige and honor. And conversely, we've never lived in a society that said over and over and over and over, this isn't enough. It's not enough. There's not enough sex to really leave me completely fulfilled. There's not enough dollars. There's not enough money out there to leave me completely fulfilled. There's not a position that I can rise to that will ultimately end this feeling of emptiness that just seems to live inside of me. Let me be clear right now. The directive to not love this world, it is directed towards people who call themselves followers of Jesus. If you're somebody in this room, like, this is not, like, I'm not a follower of Jesus, I'm going to let you know, you're off the hook right now. This was not written for you. You can live any way you want, and frankly, go ahead. Like, that's your right, that's your ability to choose. But this is written for people who say, I am a follower of Jesus. I am somebody who's bought into this whole church and God thing. And I've made him the Lord, the boss, the coach, the CEO of my life. This is ultimately written to you. So if you fall into that category of a follower of Jesus, you need to lean in and listen to this. If you keep going that direction, it will not leave you fulfilled. It will not leave you satisfied. It will not last. It is never enough. And so at the end of verse 17, it says, these things will never please God. And so if you are a follower of Jesus and you want to know, okay, so how do I please God? What do I need to do to make that happen? Well, he actually gives us a couple ways that we can do that in the book of Hebrews. In Hebrews 11:6, it says, it is impossible to please God without faith. Hebrews 13:16, just a couple chapters later, it says, don't forget to do good and to share with those in need. These are the sacrifices that please God. So there's two ways that you can please God. These are two ways that we're going to look at today. Trusting, giving. Trusting and giving. Faith is another way of saying, I trust God over my own wisdom. I know what feels right. I know what might seem right in my own head, but I'm going to trust God that his wisdom is better than mine. So it might play out like this for you. It doesn't make any sense to take a seventh-day Sabbath every week. It doesn't make any sense to take a day off where you don't do any work. It doesn't make any sense. You can be so much more productive if you just take that seventh day and monetize it, right? But that's not God's rhythm. God's rhythm is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, rest. That Sabbath was designed for us to spiritually engage, connect, and listen to God. It's a commandment. It's one part of the top 10. And so God's wisdom says, take the day off. My wisdom says, keep working. So in that moment, when I trust God and I take the break, it pleases him. It doesn't make any sense financially. It doesn't make any sense financially to say, I'm going to give part of my income away. It doesn't make any sense to say, I'm going to carve out major parts of my time and a part of my week so that I can serve other people, that I can give, that I can sacrifice for other people. That makes no financial sense. That makes no scheduling sense for you. But God says, when you trust me and you give, that pleases me. That pleases me. Ultimately, this isn't about what God's trying to keep from you. It's what he's trying to give for you. And what would happen in your life? What would happen in your family if your kids saw you model over and over and over, a life marked by trusting and giving. Everybody else is trying to fulfill every craving for physical pleasure, every craving for things that they see, pride in their achievements and possessions. That's what everybody else is doing, and they're sacrificing their families for it. But what if your kids saw you take a step away from that and say, I'm going to trust God, and I'm going to do those two things? How much would that change the impact that you can have on your kids? What would happen in your office culture? What would happen at your workplace? If as a business owner or as a leader, you said, I'm going to trust God. I'm going to be somebody who's marked by my trust in God and my giving spirit. How much would that change the culture within your business? It might not make sense financially. It might not make sense to you in your own wisdom, but what would happen if you said, because I'm a follower of Jesus, I'm going to trust his ways over my own ways? What would happen? What would happen? What would happen in Northeast Orange County if the people of Crosspointe Church were the most trusting people and the most giving people on the planet? What would happen in our community? What would happen in our state? What would happen in our nation if just 1,000 people would say, it doesn't matter what's going to cost me, I'm going to go that direction? I believe that God might have brought some of you here today to be in this position just to hear this message of what you've been chasing, the road you've been going down, even though it feels so natural, even though it feels completely right, is not leading you towards life or fulfillment. It's leading you towards destruction. Maybe God has brought you here just to hear that, and you're ready at this moment to say, all right, I'm ready. I'm ready to get on another path. I'm ready to chase something different. And you're ready to put your faith and trust in Jesus. Maybe that's you. Maybe somebody's like, hey, I became a believer a long time ago, but I seem to really love the world. I seem to love the thing that offers me more than I love God. And I'm ready to turn it over to him. No matter who you're at, no matter who you are, no matter where you sit in this room, I believe that God ultimately wants to lead you to a place where you trust him and you give to him. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I pray for the people in this room who can honestly say that they've never put their faith in you, that they've never trusted you. That God, that you would put this prayer on their lips, that God, I'm turning it all over to you. That God, I want you to be my boss, my coach, my CEO. That I want you to be the one who's in charge. That I trust you even when it conflicts with my own personal wisdom. That God, I trust you even when it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me financially, relationally, or personally. And the God, that you would honor their faith, you would honor their spirit of giving, their spirit of sacrifice, and the God that they would cry out to you, and the God that you would save them. God, I pray for the person in this room who says, I am a follower of Jesus, and I realize that I've been loving all the things that were never meant to satisfy me, and God, I'm ready to turn away from that. The God, that you would allow them to repent, that you would allow them to turn away from the cravings and the pride, and to chase after you with everything that they've got. And so, God, I pray for everybody in this room, no matter where they're at. Amen.